Our third speaker today is Gita Sahgal. She's a writer, a filmmaker, and a campaigner. She's the founder and the director of Center for Secular Space. And she was formerly the head of the gender unit at Amnesty International, and she left after discovering some links with Islamists going on there. She's written a couple of articles about that and published a lot of public. So the left's support of Islamism. She also served on board of the Black Sisters Hall, the South Hall Black Sisters, for a couple of years. Please welcome Gita Sahgal.
Well, I've been such a long supporter of the Council of Ex-Muslims, but there's always this needless cruelty practiced in that I have to follow Kate. and I think another time, somebody else is going to have to follow Kate. But it's great to see you've reached the 6th anniversary, because for a whole bunch of reasons. And some of them are very personal to me. When Nella gave her introduction, she explained what her background had been like, and how hard it had been for her growing up and coming to the conclusion that she had to leave religion, and what a difficult journey it was. And I know that many of you have been through and are going through similar journeys. I'm different from that in that I grew up in a free-thinking family, and it wasn't Muslim, but actually its culture was heavily influenced by Islam. I grew up in India, where there was a sense of multiculturalism, which, as long as it wasn't state policy, because I think India suffers from exactly the same problems as Britain does, that Kennan was explaining in his speech, that it's overturned the meaning of diversity in some ways, but in a more natural way within many Indian cultures. And I think this is actually true right across Asia, right across Africa, and right across many parts of the world, that people do not grow up in closed, solid blocks of communities. In most parts of the world, there's a huge amount of intermarriage, and there's a huge amount of mixing between of religious traditions, of people following different forms of religion, marrying into different communities, bringing up children with mixtures of those traditions. And actually, the closing down of many of these communities is not so much a part of tradition, but a part of what's happening in the modern world, and a rise in fundamentalism and a rise in the kind of state multiculturalism that we were talking about. So I grew up with an easy sense of, not having to think very much about God, and not having to decide whether I believed in God or not. And suddenly, it was really during the Rushdie affair that I became a professed atheist, because it seemed to me that we had to really counter what was a sort of sweeping tide of intolerance of various kinds, but also a very kind of gloopy postmodernism, where people say, well, there's this on the one hand and that on the other hand, and nobody really believes anything. And being an atheist was a very, very old-fashioned, solid sort of thing, kind of 19th century thing to be. And I thought, well, I've got to be this, because I didn't work in kind of focus groups that decided what was fashionable and so on. So I thought, well, I think we have to come out and I have to be an atheist. Although whether I am or not, I don't really know, because I've never really thought about God that much, and nobody ever forced me to. So I had a very easy ride, unlike many people. And that's why this organization is so precious, because those of us who have had that easy ride are far too often on the other side, that in order to prove that we're nice people and tolerant people, we have to not only decide not to discriminate against people we don't agree with, but actually to embrace those who would kill us. And that is what's happening in a lot of the academic world, and it's happening in the policy world. It's happening with the whole business of religion or belief, which is supposed to encompass atheists and humanists and so on as well, but deciding that that's part of an equalities agenda. In other words, the state, instead of deciding not to discriminate against people on grounds of their background, as Kenan said, has decided that it's going to promote various forms of religion. It's going to promote them in the prisons, thereby putting Salafis and Jihadis into prisons to actually work with people who are already in prison, very, very disturbed people who are going to be introduced to all kinds of extremely nasty ideas through the prison system. It put as this kind of policy put as head of spiritual care for Muslims a man called Chaudhry Moinuddin, whom I investigated 20 odd years ago for crimes against humanity and the kidnappings and killings of people in Bangladesh in 1971. He ends up here with the allegations against him, very well known by Scotland Yard, by the Home Office, by the Foreign Office, as the head of spiritual care for Muslims. I don't think there's a better illustration of Kenan's thesis of how wrong things have gone in this country. And there are very few organizations that are standing up against it, and all of us are struggling. We're struggling to get funds. We're struggling to survive. And I think that the irony is that the Council for Ex-Muslims has developed actually into one of the most sophisticated bodies which actually works on and is able to speak to and challenge from your position as atheists the agendas of Islam from within Muslim traditions, because so many of you know so much about it that you stand as atheists outside that tradition, but you can also talk about it from a historical, evidence-based way, more intelligently than many so-called Muslim reformers who are too busy being frightened of what fundamentalists will say. I mean, the Mehdi Hassan example was a perfect one. They want to have it both ways, and therefore they cannot actually debate. And you can, and I think that's amazing. So I've been really, really privileged to see it grow. And I feel all my life, I mean, as I said, from the time of the Rushdie affair, when I declared I was this very 19th century thing, an atheist, I felt like I was a sort of risen dinosaur and that I should grow a tail and flick it about. And I thought, okay, it doesn't matter, I'm a dinosaur, I'm a socialist, I'm an atheist, I'm all these things that are supposed to not exist anymore. And yet we see a world in which there are uprisings everywhere, people are revolting everywhere, there are secular uprisings everywhere. And I'm very pleased to see here that there are people who have been part of these secular uprisings in Bangladesh, in Turkey, and in so many other places. And I wish you all the very, very best of luck. Thank you very much.